ideas. Now, a little bit of background if you're brand new. My name is Justin. I've been trading for 5 years. I've made a little under $1 million trading. And what I didn't know is that trading would lead me down a separate path in my life, and more so just understanding my identity. Trading gave me and put me in a lot of situations that I had to confront myself. I had to confront my own emotions. I had to confront my own thoughts, why I felt a certain way. Why did money have control over me? Why did when I have a red day, I feel like shit? Because I thought that that was normal when I first started trading. Everybody would announce the same things, and I didn't see it as that. I didn't see it as normal. I actually thought it as something that was kind of mentally insane. I thought it was mentally insane for a piece of paper and a pixel on my screen to have the ability to make me feel like shit. And I started asking myself that question. I started saying, why is this? So the first thing that I want to do to kind of set the stage for this entire video is, on my board I have written trading psychology, and I want to start with scratching this out and realizing that it's mainly spirituality. Anything in business, anything in trading is spiritual, because it's my relationship with the thing. And my relationship with the thing must be spiritual. And if it's not spiritual, it will always end up producing something that is negative. I will always be stressed from it. I will always be in lack of control with it. The money is going to control me. I won't have the free will and the choice to make the decisions I want because I have a bad relationship.
This is how simple it is to create your first AI-powered algo trading robot. First, you need to select.
What is the number one psychological problem that you've seen with all the traders that you've come into contact with over the decades?
Oh, the number one by any stretch of the imagination is...
Randy Howell is a world-renowned author and trading psychologist.
His secrets in psychology has helped unprofitable traders become millionaires.
The successful trader wins by being an expert at losing. And I believe that trading is the perfect self-mastery. If you do not master the self, you are not going to be a successful trader.
There are a lot of traders out there who say trading psychology is bullshit. What are your thoughts when you hear that?
The first thing I ask, are you profitable? There's a wonderful thing about trading is that most of us spend a lifetime avoiding our psychological demons. In trading, they're going to stalk you. When you're looking at charts, you're actually looking at emotions. The vast majority are not profitable. The trading gods really don't care. The success rate of a trader to become consistently profitable is 2 to 3%. And we're moving that 2 to 3% to 30. We have a brain that is about 6 to 8 million years old. It's all about survival in the moment. And we bring that brain to trading. We believe that we can control outcome. We believe that we can make things happen. And then you get into trading and you find out that this is a game of probability, not certainty.
Loads of people in the trading space say that. You need to treat trading like a business. Would you say that's the wrong thing to do?
The truth is that trading
Number one podcast in the trading space, the fastest growing, and that's thanks to every single one of you. Hey guys, before we get into this episode, I just want to say this is an incredible moment for me directly and for all of you, no doubt, as well. Randy Howell is an absolute legend in this space. When I first started trading almost 10 years ago, I used to see his clips and his lectures all over social media and YouTube, generating millions of views and impacting millions of traders across the world. So the fact that I got to sit down with Randy myself to speak to him and to extract so much value of exactly how the trading mind works and how to operate as a trader the right way and to be profitable, it was incredible for me. And a huge thank you to Randy. I'm so happy to be able to bring to you an episode on Words of Wisdom on how to master your trading psychology with the one and only Randy Howell. Welcome everyone to the Words of Wisdom podcast. We are back once again as still the number one podcast in the trading space and the fastest growing, thanks to all of you and our incredible guests. And we're on the big US tour still. And we're on our second destination in Carolina, and we've come here for one person only. And that is a world famous trading psychology and performance coach. He has authored many books, and you've probably seen his face many times that I know I did in my journey. And it's the one and only Randy Howell.
I'm embarrassed. Thank you very much. And I really appreciate it. I thank you for sitting down with us, because I know we had gone back and forth for a while, and I'm sure you get so many requests, no doubt. It was great to speak about some of the trips you've done and the speaking engagements you've done as well.
Well, you were really interesting. It's not about you. Who is this guy? This is interesting. You really got my curiosity up. Really
Appreciate it. I'm glad we did. I'm glad we did. But I wanted to kick things off and just straight away in terms of what is the number one psychological problem that you've seen with all the traders that you've come into contact with over the decades?
Oh, the number one by any stretch of the imagination is that the brain that they brought into trading is unfit to actually manage the conditions of trading. We have a brain that is about 6 to 8 million years old, and it was built for the African savannas. And it's all about survival in the moment, okay? And it's acting on instinct. And what we do is we take that brain that is still operational. 95% of our decisions that we make on a daily basis never go through cognition. They are emotionally based from this very old brain. And we bring that brain to trading, and we have built a mind. In this mind, we believe that we can control outcome. We believe that we can make things happen. And then you get into trading and you find out that this is a game of probability, not certainty. And they come in and they come face to face with it. They get emotionally hijacked because that brain does not understand the difference between risk and threat to life. Caveman had no money to play with. What he had was survival, and he shared the world with saber-toothed tigers, the same caves. And ultimately, a threat to self is a threat to capital, to the primitive brain. And you get in there, and what happens is people want to not lose, because to them that not losing is, guess what? Getting deranged by a saber-toothed tiger. At the same time, you also want to win, and you will get cranked up. Like, for instance, if you and 8 guys find a woolly mammoth and you decide to attack it because it's going to feed the village forever and all this kind of stuff, you're going to have to get really cranked up. That's a dangerous animal. People died. So in the same way that when you see overtrading, it's the same principle going on. It's seeing the reward, big news, and it gets cranked up, and it blinds itself to the risk that's involved. So out of it is, the first order is that we're bringing a brain that, thank God, evolutionary, it allowed us to survive, but now we're asking it to do something that evolution didn't build. And if you're going to go beyond that and get to where you're actually consistently profitable in your trading, you're going to have to train instinct that has been around for 6 to 8 million years to accept a very different reality with the uncertainty that you deal with in trading all the time. That's where it starts.
I love that. And there's so much to unpack there. And it's so fascinating always to hear how the markets brings that fight or flight response. Even though there's no physical action really involved, other than that's as far as it goes, yeah. But no physical action in terms of, as you say, that actual risk of life, right? But there's risk involved, and that risk sort of bridges between the two. But have you ever come across, when you're working with people, trying to help them sort of navigate and change that mindset and be able to handle that risk better, would you say that you've worked with people with it not able to remove themselves from that brain, that evolutionary brain?
Yeah, all the time. That's, if you take a look at the success rate in trading, 95% are going to go down, and another 2 or 3% are going to be marginal and make some money. But there's only 2 or 3% of people who actually generate wealth out of this, and those are the people who have been able to reorganize their mind for whatever reason, not necessarily with the trader psychologist, but somehow they've been able to remold the mind. And there are other people who are scared. I can't tell you how many times. It's very common for me to have a guy, I'm working with him, and he's made some really breakthroughs. He's actually putting really good trading mind together to act not on winning or losing, but on performance. And it starts showing that he's extracting more capital out of the markets than he's giving back in. He's really happy, elated, and he tells his friends. And then he'll say, you got to go see this guy. Oh no, I'm not going to go see any shrink. what happens if he finds something wrong with me? And I'm going, of course there's something wrong with you. You're taking a brain incapable of doing what you're asking it to do, and you're trying to force it. And then it bucks at you and kicks you hard. So yeah, it happens all the time.
Let's take a break for a minute there, guys, because I want to tell you about our incredible sponsor, Alpha Prime, the first of its kind in the industry. Now, evaluation firms have been in the industry for the last few years and done absolutely phenomenal in terms of its impact for traders. As you can see here, through Alpha Capital and Futures, so many payouts to so many traders across the world. But now, for the first time, there is an incredible route for traders to become professionals and to trade live capital, and that's through Alpha Prime. So let me quickly tell you how it works. You could just buy a challenge on Alpha Capital or Alpha Futures, doesn't matter which one. So Alpha Capital, you have phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 challenges. On Alpha Futures, you have standard and advanced plans. Whichever one, purchase a challenge, show consistency, build your track record, and then you can be invited to Alpha Prime. Alpha Prime, you will get access to live capital, you will get access to risk management and resources at a professional level. You will have a salary as a trader and access to trade on live trading floors starting here in London. This is the first of its kind, where an evaluation firm is finding talented traders and then backing them with live capital and creating a route to professional trading. I am very proud to be sponsored by Alpha Prime. The links for both will be in the description below. Alpha Capital and Alpha Futures, use the code RIZ for 20% off all challenges. Link is in the description below. Now let's get back to the episode. What would you say those traits, have you ever seen any sort of common traits with those people where they struggled to make those changes?
They really believe in winning. They have to win to prove themselves. It's like, particularly like with alphas, their winning is not just about money. Money is representational of power, of mattering, of status. And that hooks back into our caveman stuff, is that if you were an alpha and you went out and took that woolly mammoth down with friends, what happens, you've got tremendous status. You had first dibs to the food, you had leadership qualities, and you also had first dibs on the breeding stock. So your genes were going into the future at a higher rate than anything else. That's hardwired. And so people come in wanting to win, wanting to prove themselves. And if they make money, they have power, they have status, they have all this. And they forget that the rules of success in trading are enormously different than the rules of success in the world out there. It's kind of like Newtonian physics, large particle physics, and quantum mechanics. They're different rules. And if you try to force Newtonian physics principles onto microscopic type of particles, it blows up in your face. And it's the same thing that alphas do. Because alphas blow up money, man. They really do.
Is it kind of because of the need to be an alpha and the traits of that personality aren't suited towards what the markets are needed?
I've actually had a guy that I worked with a number of years ago was a very successful serial entrepreneur. When he graduated from college, he sold a bar business for $500,000. Wow. Now, I don't know about you, but when I got out of college, I didn't have an extra $500,000 floating around. But then over time, he had always been
So, जो हमारा थॉट प्रोसेस है वो बेसिकली ये है कि हमें 200 EMA ब्लू लाइन के नीचे है और EMA के नीचे क्लोज हुआ था, तो दैट्स व्हाई वी आर प्लानिंग कि ये नीचे साइड में आ सकता है. ओके, तो बहुत ज़्यादा बड़ा नहीं है, 1:2 का ही रखा हुआ है बिकॉज बॉक्स में ही घूम रहा है, ऑलमोस्ट इस एरिया के बीच में ही घूम रहा है. बट ये मैंने थोड़ा सा एग्जैजरेट करके नीचे रख दिया है. बट मेन हमारे टारगेट पॉइंट्स ये रहेंगे. लेट्स सी.
forth. But what's the reality of that look like? Is it a case where there really are a lot of people out there probably who aren't capable of trading, and even if that means that they do it for a long time, they're just not capable of the change that's needed? As you said, relinquishing that control, the power that trading is necessary for consistent trading.
Well, I'll tell you something. In my individual work, we follow a program where I'm actually teaching a process, okay? From understanding emotion very differently than you probably do now, to learning how to regulate emotion, to being able to produce an observer where you recognize you and your thinking aren't the same, to discovering the destructive part of the human potential, and then also building and empowered elements of yourself that have been with us since the beginning. And you learn how to reconstruct the mind you bring. And it's very powerful. And I have about a 30% success rate with my individual clients. Now, I used to think, God, I don't want to tell any about that, much less have this all over the dang universe. And then I realized, a guy was talking to me, he says, Randy, if a Major League Baseball player hits 300 for a lifetime, he's going to be in the Hall of Fame. That's great. And I realized that, you know something, the success rate of a trader is to become consistently profitable at 2 to 3%. And we're moving that 2 to 3% to 30. And at the same time, you still have groups of people for whatever reason. I have in my file this morning, I looked in there and I said, you know, these files have been in here for like a couple of years and I've never seen them. I've actually had people pay money up front and never show up for a first meeting.
Really?
What's that all about? Okay, talking about fear of like being exposed. And at the same time, there's a lot of people who just are not willing to change. They think this is the way it should be, and I'm going to be bullheaded about it, and I'm going to force my will upon the markets, upon life, and stuff like that. And the trading gods just kind of laugh at that stuff about us being able to control the will of the markets. So there's lots. I wish there were an evaluation tool that would allow traders to really find out before they start sinking a lot of capital, a lot of their interest into it, whether or not they actually have what it takes to begin to shape that. That would be an interesting thing.
Definitely would be.
I'm actually talking to a guy who used to be in used to work with me, and is now running a good-sized organization, where he's saying, Randy, I would like you to start teaching it in my group, and what I would really like to do is offer this instrument that helps us to decide whether or not we're going to actually work with these people, whether or not we can at least get in more narrow about whether or not they have a chance of doing this. Because it's a hard business to, well, that's just it. It's not really a business. There is a business aspect to it. But it's a mindset problem of where you're actually having to remold a mind and get it to do things that it truly was diametrically opposed to by evolution, that has been hardwired into an instinct. So it's very hard.
In terms of business, one thing you mentioned there is it's like a business, because I've heard loads of people, especially because there's a couple of things we can touch on, but we'll start with the business element, which is loads of people in the trading space say that you need to treat trading like a business. Would you say that's the wrong thing to do?
Good luck. Obviously, trading is transactional in that you're extracting capital, you're putting back in capital, and at the end of the day, you're finding out what your return on investment is. Okay, so and you're going to have to pay taxes on that. So yeah, there is an aspect of it being business, but to think that I'm going to take the mind that I use for business, winning,
feel there is an element of, especially nowadays, but even throughout your career, no doubt, there was still mentorships and guidance, but rather than social media and being so readily available, it was probably more so in seminars and things like of this nature. But regardless, do you think a lot of people build a lot of limiting beliefs that they get really stuck to and sort of really put into their foundational beliefs, even so that it becomes so difficult for them to break them because of the maybe even a pedestal that they've put this particular trader on that they're learning from, or someone they look up to, or someone they want to mirror, and that's the message they're providing them. So then when, let's say, someone like yourself is telling them, no, you need to think in this way or put these practices in place, and they're saying, no, well, I've learned from so and so, or this person does it this way. Is that do you think that's something that definitely happens?
Oh, all the time, and it really boils down to that all of us are born into a world, and I don't know if you've noticed, but we've been born into an incredibly broken world. Okay, and it just so happens your brain's function is to adapt to survive in that world, whether or not you're a wildebeest or whether or not you're a human being. And unfortunately, what happens
themselves and accept that limiting belief?
Yeah, but I take it a step further than that. I teach a process, and people have no idea what an emotion really is. They have no idea. They don't grasp that all thinking is emotional state dependent. It is your emotions generating your ability to produce explanations about what's going on out here. And so the first thing I'm doing is I'm educating people that you don't have emotions. They have you. And that until you wise up and put down all the barky sounds of being a tough guy, the emotion's still going to overwhelm you. It is more powerful than you ever imagined. Your body is part of that emotion. The way you breathe, the way you hold tension is part of that emotion. It's the arousal element. And once it hits a particular threshold, it's taking out the mind. It's taking out the cognitive mind. So I'm teaching, first of all, I'm getting people to understand that they really need to change their opinion about emotions. It's not like you can live without emotions. The only time that you don't have emotions is when you're dead. However, you can develop freedom of emotion so that you actually become the spearhead of being able to develop an emotional cocktail that thinking arises out of that allows you to perform really well in trading. The second part is that you have to regulate the emotion. In the first part of the training with me, you're learning how to breathe diaphragmatically as you trade. You're also having a mirror or a video camera on you to see all the tenseness and see that you're not breathing, which means you're accelerating the emotions sent to take over mind, hijack mind. And then I teach, when you do that, I also teach mindfulness of where you recognize that you and your thoughts are not the same. That, again, you don't have thoughts, they're having you. They're creating your stuff. And most likely, it's history coming right through you and continue its creation. Like, for instance, I come from a family that lost generational wealth the generation before me.
Wow.
And it was always the Macmillans getting the money back from the O'Connors who stole it from them. It was just, it was crazy. And I found myself always trying to get the money back. And even into adulthood, I found myself in one business I would do, something would happen, I would want to get the money back. That's what I knew and understood. If I was going to have power, I was going to have to get the money back. Then it occurred to me that, something, money is actually a transaction. It's really more about, it's the grease that makes things happen. It's not a good way to measure your inherent worth as a human being. And in the time that I finally learned to change that belief to where now capital is really more.
चल तो बहुत बढ़िया रहा है. Come on. क्या लगता है?
These are beliefs that once you begin to develop the empowered elements of your potential, that you can actually bring to bear, and you can turn toward the self-limiting belief, and you can actually identify it much more easy, because now you're realizing, oh my God, I as a human being have been given this gift of being captain of my own destiny. I can build the way the environment, you're looking at greed going, it has some good qualities to it. The thing is we need to start defining how those qualities are going to activate. Because if you really have a belief of scarcity, you want to make money and you're greedy to get it. And that greed starts dominating the committee of the mind rather than having a balanced part of that mind. And so ultimately, it's not that greed is bad, it's just you don't know how to use emotions intelligently. Your EQ, your emotional intelligence is low. But as you develop that EQ, you begin to see that, I mean, even shame, understand shame has a bad rap. If you want to change, you're going to have to employ shame. Shame is an emotion that says, the way you're currently organized is not working for the good of the whole. You need to reorganize yourself. And what it does is it starts the party, disorganizes you, and the brain flips out. And it wants everything in the world not to feel that again, so it shuts it off. But if you really find the courage, a number of years ago, I led my wife into a business debacle that cost me a couple $1 million.
Wow.
Okay? And I felt nothing but shame. At that time, I was this guy who thought, I am so cool, I am so great, and we were living this high life, and then a recession happened, the business started failing, and we were financially underwater, and I was deeply ashamed. I was a failure. You know, I wasn't the man that I purported to be. And I said, Dolores, you can leave. I know you're going to be leaving. And she has a temper, but boy, she really got angry. And what she got angry about was that that I thought that her love for me had anything to do with the abundant success that I was claiming. And out of that, though, in the dissolution of that organization itself, what we discovered is that the one thing that I really wanted to be and wanted to do with my life is I wanted to help people grow as I had been able to grow and get out of the confinement of the self-limiting beliefs that I was born into and had executed. So the greed ended up reorganizing me into much more higher functioning. So if you have failure in trading, that failure, it's not saying there's something wrong with you. It's saying the way you're currently organized and your competency needs to be looked at and changed to be able to match up with the requirements of trading. So, like even shame, guilt, all that, they are there because they were integral parts of our survival as a species.
So even fear, the same element is that there are benefits to it. But
Failure?
If failure, fear.
Oh, I'm going to tell you, failure, you know, the brain does not learn from success. Success hits the dopamine button and it more hardwires the pattern.
Yeah.
And it'll get you in a lot of trouble. Failure is forcing the brain, that's the way the brain learns. If you look at failure and all of a sudden you're going, okay, it's not about me, it's about my competencies. And you learn to reorganize yourself to do better. Ray Kroc, McDonald's, he was famous for having the words, I failed my way to success.
Yes.
Okay? And it's the same thing, is that if you're afraid of failure, oh my God, don't step out the front door, much less start trading. Because in trading, you have this thing of where, let's say you take a loss. I teach my folk to do this. Is this a method mistake? And let's say that, no, you executed your method was fine and all of that. That doesn't need to be looked at, reformed. Is this a psychological mistake? Let's say that, no, you actually performed quite well and you did exactly what your rule said and you still lost. So what happens, you realize that loss is just simply probability. You're not going to learn from it because it really wasn't a failure. I actually consider that to be success in trading. But if there's a psychological mistake there, it's exposing it so that it can be worked with. If there's a method mistake there, the same thing is it's exposing it so you can decide whether or not that method, that rule, actually is delivering the goods, or whether or not you're growing past that methodology, those sets of rules. So, no, all the emotions are built for you to be able to survive as a group. and they can get skewed, but they don't have to be.
What processes would you give to traders as they're actively trading? Is there things that once they've entered a trade or executed on a trade, or the trader's given it?
Have you noticed how you keep delaying the things that matter most to you? You plan your goals, you even get excited about the
This is your brain when you're struggling to focus. And this is your brain when you're in the zone.
Here's the reality. Your college degree took 4 years and $100,000. AI skills, 28 days and $20. Guess which one your boss cares about more in 2026?
Stop. Please stop using ChatGPT like it's Google. Get AI certified in 28 days and you won't recognize yourself.
So I'm over 42 and I just got AI certified in less than a month. One program changed everything. I didn't quit my job or spend thousands on courses. Instead, I joined the 28-day AI challenge.
What if I've never worked with AI before?
Perfect. This challenge is built for people over 40.
Yeah.
A simple learning routine that fits your life, not disrupts it, and the best part, you're AI certified at the end.
So when does the program start showing results?
In 1 week, you'll feel unstoppable.
Yeah.
In 2 weeks, you'll have your strategy. In a month, you'll wonder why you didn't start sooner. Tap the screen to join us.
स्टॉक मार्केट शिकणं म्हणजे एवढी सगळी पुस्तकं वाचणं आलं, असंख्य स्ट्रॅटेजीज, चार्ट्स, पॅटर्न्स हे सगळं शिकायची गरज, सोबतच रोज 1 ते 2 तासाची प्रॅक्टिस. अहो हे सगळं करायला आपल्याकडे वेळ आहे का? हे शिकायची पण आपल्याला गरज आहे का? आता गरज नाहीये. का? एआयला सगळं जमतंय ना. मग आपल्याला काय शिकायचंय? ह्या एआय कडून हे सगळं करून कसं घ्यायचंय? आपल्यालाही शिकायचंय ना. शिकवणार आहे मी माझ्या 3 तासाच्या ऑनलाईन मास्टर क्लासमध्ये फक्त ₹9त. खाली दिलेल्या लिंकवर क्लिक करा आणि आत्ताच आपलं सीट रजिस्टर करा. भेटूयात आपल्या मास्टर क्लासमध्ये.
I went from being a broke college student, completely lost in a debt 8 years ago, to now being worth over $7 million at the age of 28 as an entrepreneur. I'm fortunate enough that I was able to pull this off, so I'm going to talk from the heart, explain the plan that I created when I was 19, and how it brought me to where I am right now, so that hopefully some of it is applicable and helpful to you. My name is Craig Prococo, and this is my story. Growing up, just for context, I was nothing special. I had a great foundation and a great family dynamic, but I feel like I always had this chip on my shoulder, like I wanted to be different or I wanted to do something extraordinary. And I was sort of trapped in this area where I felt like there was a glass ceiling over my head where the objective for everyone around me was get a job, be part of the pipeline. And it felt like I was subconsciously being rewarded for taking the safe route, following security. And anytime I would sort of talk about a dream or sort of big ambitions, I kind of felt embarrassed. And I'm not sure exactly what caused that, but it was sort of just the atmosphere in the area that I was around that sort of put this block on what I thought to be possible as a kid. I was living in this sort of bubble that everything was perfect, everything was fine, and then all of a sudden in 2014, our home got foreclosed on, and my family was basically forced to move out, try to find a place to live, and we ended up living with my grandma. So as soon as I turned about 15, 16 years old, the dynamic shifted very quickly, where all of a sudden I realized I have zero safety net, and this isn't just go to college, it'll be taken care of, and you'll figure it out. It's like you have to figure it out right now, and no one's here to save you. And that was sort of a shift point in my mindset where I realized how harsh the world actually was, and that if you want to win in this game, you have to be meticulous, you have to go after it, and you have to take charge of what you want. You can't just sit there passively and then go to the path of least resistance and expect to get a result that is better than the average. So this was really the beginning of my plan. So in 2015, I decided to push off going to college, and I went directly into the military. Number one, it was going to help me pay for school, which I couldn't do alone. And number two, I know it would basically set me up with a backup plan, because at that point, I still had no idea what I was going to do with my life. And honestly, I could not picture working in a cubicle, working a job, or working for a boss. That just never was a thought in my mind that I could be able to handle long term. So I spent 6 months of my life basically completely off the grid, going through my training. Over this time, I was actually able to accumulate some money. So eventually I returned, and the dynamic was still really, really strange. And I decided to anyways enroll into college, but I got deferred until the spring semester. So I had about 6 to 8 months worth of time where I had the money from the military, and I was basically at home waiting to go to college. So at first in my mind, I was like, oh great, I have like a 6-month vacation. And then it sort of dawned on me, I'll never forget this moment. It was this one quote that popped into my head at that moment where I thought, oh wow, I have all this free time. There was like, if you don't figure out how to make your money work for you when you're asleep, it'll work till you die. Then I basically decided I'm going to spend this period of time figuring out how to take the money that I have right now and make it work for me. So I basically spent 6 months of my life just locked in reading about how to make money online, how to make passive income. And this is where I first really learned about investing. And this led me to make my first investment ever, which in hindsight was a complete completely ridiculous, terrible idea, but it showed me one really important lesson. And this is one of the biggest lessons that I've learned that has changed the entire trajectory of my life. And I'm gonna sort of explain it to you right now. But first, the story. So I was looking up, what is investing? It's getting fractional ownership of businesses. And then I was like, well, if a business is about to be bought, shouldn't that mean that that business itself is valuable? So I started reading about companies that were getting bought, and I found a stock called Cleveland Cliffs Natural Resources, or CLF. So not knowing that this was a terrible idea, I took all the money in my account, even added a little bit of margin, dumped it into this stock, and I was like, okay, let's see what happens. And then over the next 2 days, I was hanging out with my friends, basically just doing nothing, and I kept checking my phone and being like, this money just keeps going up. And over the course of 2 days, I was able to double my account balance, which basically meant that I was able to make $4,000 a day. And I thought to myself, I was like, you mean to tell me that if I get good at figuring out this one thing, that I can make more in 2 days than what the average person makes in an entire month? And that's where the light bulb went off in my head, where I figured out if I looked at money as a product of time worked, it immediately puts you in a framework of having this glass ceiling of where you can take things. And I had no idea at the time, but this ended up positioning me psychologically to be able to get to where I am right now when I had to make decisions along the way. And a lot of people disagree with me on this, but I really want you to just fully absorb what I have to say and try to understand. So as I was reading more and more about investing, I was reading about something called compound interest. And I basically realized, number one, it doesn't matter almost at all how much money I was starting with investing, but even at 18 and 19 years old, if I was able to put $100 a week into something like the stock market, so the S&P 500, I could have $5 million in my account by the time I retired. If I was able to even do $200 per week, that was going to be almost $10 million by the time I retired. And then the wheel started turning where I was like, if I spent 4 years instead of going to college and going into debt, working full time and spending all of my effort as if I was going to college, learning this skill, if I could get to something where I was putting $2,000, $2,500 a week into a process like this, by the time I retired, I'd be worth over $100 million. And because of my initial investment, I realized that I didn't need to accumulate that money from only working a job. I could figure out different skills to be able to do. And as long as I was starting in this process early, that I would basically have an opportunity to be one of the wealthiest people in my bloodline. And I don't know if that's a weird motivation, but honestly, that was something that motivated me, where I was looking around me and we definitely have a lot of smart, successful people in the family, not to the ultimate level. And then at the same time, I realized I could apply the same logic that I did with buying the stock on a daily time frame to basically be able to multiply my money. And that's where I first found my obsession with day trading. This is where I realized I can set a specific risk amount, and if I'm able to predict levels like I was with that stock, I could 3, 4, 5x my capital and make significantly more in a single day than any of my peers were talking about making at a job, and let alone being able to make that money in your 20s. So still, after realizing all of this, when the spring came around, I decided to go to college, but in the back of my mind, I knew that I was completely obsessed with this, and this is what I was going to dedicate my life to. I was almost going through the motions just to appease other people, which in hindsight, I wish I didn't do. But when I finally got to college, I found myself skipping classes. I had zero interest in what I was doing, and all I was doing with every single moment, even in class, was learning how to trade and how to invest. And after the first semester, by the time February rolled around, I made the decision to leave college, and now I had to go face my family, face everybody who was going to tell me this is a terrible idea and think that I'm absolutely out of my mind what my plan was. And moreover, I was going to have to explain to them that I was going to try to make money in the stock market and with investing.
So today's a pretty big day. I just officially withdrew from UMass Amherst. And the reason I did this was because I'm going to trade stocks.
So I remember I packed up my 2004 Jeep Wrangler with all the stuff that I had, and I drove back to my grandmother's house my family was living in at the time. And my grandmother's like, "Oh, you're back home early? Why?" And I'm like, "I left college." I just looked at her face and she immediately melted down in tears. And for the first week, I basically didn't talk to my family because they were so distraught at the fact that our family was in shambles, and now you have this kid who's dropping out of college and we're living in my grandmother's house essentially. But I had such conviction, and I knew I had a well thought out plan, that all I was doing was saying, "This is my plan, you have to hear me out." And I remember I pulled my parents into the room, and my parents were honestly, after I explained this, very supportive. They were obviously just nervous, but I explained to them, here's the plan. And I showed them all the math, and I'll never forget they told me one thing. They were like, "I never went for my dream, so what kind of parent would I be if I discouraged my child from making the same mistake that I did?" And I think there's a lesson in this. You're rewarded for your convictions. If an idea was obvious, everybody would do it and there would be no upside to it. So with that conviction, this is where the work started, and I had no idea idea how dark it was going to get from here. From here, I had racked up $15,000 worth of college debt, and I had been draining the money that I made from the military and from my investments that I still hadn't paid tax on into trying to pay for me to go to college. So I basically wiped out all the money that I had, and my loans actually went delinquent. So at this point, even before I left college, I was driving 2.5 hours back and forth to do job interviews in the city. So I had jobs that I was going to. And believe it or not, I actually got fired from 2 of the jobs because they said I wasn't qualified or good enough, until I got to my 3rd job where I started performing very well, which also went to show me your environment dictates how you feel about yourself, and your value is determined by your environment. Nothing about me changed. I got fired from 2 places and ended up being one of the best at the 3rd place. If you think about it, water out of your faucet is free, but at an airport, it's like $6 or $7. The environment dictates the value. So at this point, I was basically spending from 8 a.m. until 4 or 5 p.m. where I had to drive into work. I would work the entire night, wake up, and then practice my trading, do simulated trading, actually start trading. This is where I took about $2,500 and over the course of summer was able to turn it into about $15,000. And I was saying, oh my God, this is great. This is working out so well. And then I remember I made one mistake, came back to my charts, and I had seen that my entire account got liquidated in one mistake. And from this point on, I was working at my bar job trying to figure out the trading thing. And people were starting to look at me like, is this going to work? What's going on? Why isn't this working yet? And they were saying, well, maybe you should quit. Maybe you should just go back to college, get a job, be an EMT, do something like this. But I was convinced that I was able to figure this out, but it kept taking longer and longer than I had hoped for. And I continued to hear more and more people in my ear, more people judging me. My peers were like, I thought you left college to make money. All you're doing is losing money. And this was probably one of the hardest periods to get through, probably even harder than leaving college itself, because I had to face the fact that my idea was not working. From there, it actually got worse. And I'll never forget this moment. I hear a massive argument blowing up while I'm upstairs working. Mind you, I'm barely leaving my room at this point, just working basically around the clock, trying to figure this trading thing out. Next thing I know, I'm coming downstairs to a massive argument between my parents where they basically blow up. And that was the last time that they basically were together. But at this point, I basically had a deadline to move out of the house and try to figure out where I was going to live. So at this point, my family's basically fallen apart. My plan is not working, and now I have to figure out where I'm going to live, and I have no plan from here. But it's interesting because something that I've figured out is that when things are just sort of okay, sometimes you need them to shift into really bad in order for them to get to really good. And I think that this is exactly what happened. At the same time, this is exactly when COVID started. So the job that I was working at laid me off. I got another job, also laid me off. So at this point, I made a decision with myself. I had to either figure it out or I was going to quit. And sometimes it's hard to know this, but when your back is against the wall, this is where you figure out how you actually feel and what type of person you actually are. And as weird as it sounds, this is where things actually started turning around for me. So at the time of COVID, the markets were all dumping, but because of my experience and what I've been learning about investing, I knew that this was actually an opportunity period. One thing that I also saw was considerably down was Bitcoin. And before I had heard about Bitcoin, I had looked slightly into it, but I never really took the time to understand what it actually was. So once I saw that Bitcoin was down substantially, I essentially sat down and read the entire white paper of Bitcoin, which explained exactly how it worked. And I remember realizing that once I figured out how insane of an opportunity the Bitcoin was, especially at that time where it was what, $7,000 to $8,000, I run downstairs and I'm telling my mom, I'm like, this could potentially be one of the biggest opportunities that we'll see in the next 200 to 500 years. This is like buying the stock market when it first started. So you got to picture me in my waiter outfit with my 2004 Jeep Wrangler, driving into the middle of the city, taking all the cash that I had, converting it into cashier's checks, uploading it into softwares, and then positioning myself in all of these instruments in the midst of COVID where everyone's selling stuff, telling me you're crazy, don't do this. Then all of a sudden the market started to bottom and started to get momentum. And as the market was recovering, I was looking at how much more the crypto market was moving and how much more multiples I was getting as it was moving up. And that's where my interest in crypto being such an emerging market really lit up. So I immediately just went in and started researching every single crypto, reading about all the details about how cryptography worked. I was basically fully invested in this entire niche. Okay, and at the time I had started my YouTube channel in 2017. I was barely posting on there. I just wanted to basically be able to document my journey up to this point. And I would drop videos, they would get 50 views, 200, 300 views. And I remember at this time, I was like, I have to figure out how YouTube works. I have to lock in and take everything that I'm trying to do right now extremely serious. And at the same time I was researching this crypto, I was learning how YouTube worked. And I was learning that when you're starting a small channel, you don't want to try to make videos about the biggest topics because you're never going to be able to compete with the most viewed videos. What you want to do is dominate a niche where there's an abnormal amount of demand and not enough videos to fulfill that demand. Then you build a subscriber base, which will boost your views. And then you can start talking about bigger and bigger subjects along the way. And once I realized that, I looked into a cryptocurrency called Cardano or ADA, and I put a significant amount of money into this. And then I was like, I wonder how much search volume there is for Cardano. So I put it into a tool that I was using, and all of a sudden I see that there's like 10 million monthly searches, and the most viewed video on Cardano was like some weird guy talking about it that had like 3,400 views and it was barely produced. And all of a sudden a switch went off in my head where I was like, there are a ton of people who are going to care about this a lot, and there's almost nothing being talked about online. But this was a period where I was like, nobody talked to me. I'm locking myself in my room. I'm investing everything that I have into this cryptocurrency stuff. I'm going to learn about it, invest in it, make videos about it, sharing this information with as many people as possible while growing a following at the same time. And this is where I started my Discord community that now has 170,000 members in it. And I remember I took all of the money and I was just sitting at my house investing it into Dogecoin at 4 cents, which I called on YouTube. It got like 300,000 views immediately, and people were like blown away with the fact that I was able to sort of get this message out to people and that I was making these levels of predictions. So if the Discord was flooded, I was taking the same information from my trading and applying it into the crypto market and just making $5,000-$10,000 on swing trades, doubling my account, tripling my account. My Cardano position made me more money than I'd ever seen. My Dogecoin position made me more money than I'd ever seen. And all of a sudden, this was my first glimpse into a breakthrough where I had been working, waiting for a moment. I honed in when I had conviction and I executed. And I finally started to see a shimmer of success. So I went all in for basically about 6 to 8 months straight, just working on this process. And I can cut to footage right here where I finally hit 10,000 subscribers. And it's interesting to see where my head was at that moment. So I was saving this for an important moment because I just hit 10,000 subscribers, which means I'm doing something right, and you guys have all basically helped me this entire time get here. It was a slow progress, and I had to teach myself a lot and start from the ground zero, so this means a lot to me, so we're gonna open it and celebrate. And I was sort of on this high where the market was just continuing to move up and I was making more and more money. Fast forward that year, I found myself at the age of 23 years old in Lisbon, Portugal, negotiating deals in coffee shops for like 20K investments. And this was an investment on Dosana, which ended up going up like 2,000%. I made the biggest trade in my entire life in a coffee shop and realized that I had made $500,000 in like 3 days. So you got to imagine, 6 months ago, I was scrambling to put money together in a waiter's outfit, and now I'm in Lisbon, Portugal, and I just made $500,000 coming from being in debt to that point. But this is also the same exact point where things would completely change for me. Literally, while I was on the flight home, this is where the 2021 crypto market crash happened, and Bitcoin basically dropped by 30 to 40% in a few day period and ended up drawing down nearly 80%. And almost all of the investments that I had lost basically 70-80% of the value. Everyone in the community was freaking out. I was trying to figure out what I was going to do. So basically everything that I had invested in other than Bitcoin was almost effectively worthless at a certain point. And things really started to get dark here. For a moment, I was almost relieved that all the pressure of making videos and having the community was sort of dissipating because people were like taking a step back, but things did start to get more ugly. I had a lot of money in a cryptocurrency called Luna. I remember waking up one morning and everyone was like, hey, are you okay? Are you okay? And I'm like, what? And they're like, look at Luna. And I just remember my heart dropping. I opened TradingView and I'm in my bed and I look at the chart, and the chart basically went from being, I think, like $96, $97, and it was at like $2 in like one candle. And I had a lot of my money in there. And I remember over that period, I lost $160,000 in like, again, probably 7-8 hours. And not only that, but I had been talking about it. I had been discussing it. So I really felt insult to injury. I had wiped out almost all the money that I had been making. And then in addition to that, now I lost another $160,000 on Luna. This is before I paid any of my taxes or anything. So it just kept getting worse and worse to the point where basically I felt I had very little to show for all of the money and the ideas that I had. And I basically was sitting on like $300,000 after being up 1.5, maybe almost near $1.7 million at the age of 23. I had CPAs telling me to sell all my cryptocurrency and de-risk and get out, and that I was making really, really poor decisions. But there's a silver lining to this, because I had remembered the feeling of how I felt before, where everything was hopeless, where I had felt like it was about to be the end. And I remembered most of the time when people quit and the tide goes out, that's where the strong people double down and figure out what to do in those moments. And when there's blood in the streets, those are almost always the best time to buy things, when no one is thinking about buying and everybody is scared and uncertain. And this is sort of a period of time where I made a decision that I was going to fully educate myself on a structured plan, and that I was really going to focus majority on my systematic trading and investing rather than getting into hype and crypto, and only focusing on what was relevant because it was so volatile and unpredictable. Honestly, I was so jaded from 90% of the cryptos being BS anyways that I was sort of just like done. I threw my hands up and I'm like, I believe in Bitcoin. I'm a Bitcoin maxi now. I'll invest in other things, but only as trades. And I'm going to figure out when things are hype and everyone's excited, that's where I'm going to be taking profits. And when everyone's down in the dumps and scared, that's the only time I'm going to be buying anything. So in this moment of Zen clarity, I really figured out two major things that would eventually turn out to change my entire life. First of all, this is where I really went into systematizing strategy testing for trading and figured out that trading really comes down to two key metrics, which is your winning percentage and how much money you're making versus how much you're losing each time you take a trade. And what we would do is basically take these strategies and run them through deep back testing and data modeling, and we figured out what we could do to be able to pull profit out day trading. Okay, so we were building trade journals, mechanisms of testing, and this is where we really pulled together the core team of people who, when the dust settled, were like, we are going to figure this out and we're going to work together. And that's still the team that we have today. And I realized I could simulate this process over testing and figure out if I could build a mechanism that would generate positive risk factors, okay, which is basically when you enter a trade, how much you're risking on the table. If you're winning, you're making positive risk factors. If you're losing those contained risk factors. Then it's just a matter of injecting capital into that framework. We could test it without ever putting money on the table. And this allowed me to basically scale into my trading. I started documenting it on YouTube, and this is where the trading finally started to pay off because I was looking at it through a different lens of experience that I had gathered from all these instances. And now I'm lucky enough to have a team that's also killing it with these things, and I can share this with as many people as possible, and once again make a major impact in other people's lives, and that's just an incredible thing. The second thing that I learned at this time was something called Bitcoin cycle mapping. Now, the first time I invested in crypto, I knew that it was early in the opportunity, but I had no idea how to actually position myself on exits and entries into the market. And what I realized is that Bitcoin, if you look at the data from what's called a logarithmic perspective, if you set the time horizon and the price horizon to logarithmic, Bitcoin actually moves up in a straight line. It's perfect money. And I think that most of the world hasn't really figured this out yet. We'll see if I end up being right, 10, 15 years down the line. I have a feeling that there's a high probability that that might be the case. And I realized all I have to do is figure out the halving cycles on Bitcoin. Whenever we enter this lower threshold, buy more, go into risk on cryptos. And then as soon as we start to enter this top band here, this is where you start to exit your positions, and you can compound your money insanely fast as compared to what I was modeling out over the stock market. So if I keep the stocks there, but I'm also able to take all the money that I'm generating from trading, from business, and put it into this cycle mapping process in crypto, I can make 600, 700% over the course of 3 or 4 years and get to the point where my projections of 10, 15 million dollars by the time I'm retired turns more into 150, 250 million dollars by the time I retire. And at this point, my mind was completely expanded to the point where that glass ceiling from before completely gone. I figured out the database of money and the fact that it has nothing to do with how much work you're doing or how much you care or how much you try. You simply have to figure out how to take that database and increase the numbers on the database, and that's it. So at this point, I had my CPAs telling me still like, de-risk, get out, crypto's going to zero, all this stuff, but I knew too much at this point. I knew the asymmetry and the risk of being convicted when others are not and how that would pay out. Once again, I had lost a substantial amount of capital, but my trading was starting to work, so I knew I can sustain myself, I can have my apartment still with this, but if I start to kill it with this and I can continue rotating my profits in at these times and it actually works out, I'm in an insane position. And that's exactly what I did. And you can go on YouTube where I was literally banging my hands on the table saying, do you really think that Bitcoin's not going to do this with the institutional buy pressure, with all this stuff? I was going all in, talking about future potential. I've been making every video talking about this for the past basically 2 to 3 years. And at this point, I explained to my private team, I made a whole video, I'll never forget it. I say, I'm going 30% into Solana because it's beaten down from FTX. I gave a whole explanation. This was at $30. Now it's at over 200 as I'm making this video. I'm going basically majority rest in Bitcoin, adding to my position here. And then I'm just treating other things as small risk on trades trades where they can either go to 0 or they're going to go 10, 15x. And these are all the crazy altcoins. So instead of going all into one of those and losing 80%, I was going to take all the risk on cryptos and just buy them at the bottom of the cycle, because almost none of them have real utility other than people speculating on their future utility anyways. So if the overall market cap of crypto goes up because of the global liquidity at any point again, which we could see from the cycle mapping happens every single time, all the stuff that I was buying was going to go up anyways. So once again, I went completely risk on because I understood the importance of investing early in compound interest, which I had learned when I started investing at the age of 19. Because I hear all the time, I don't want to wait until I'm 65 to get rich. But the thing is, that's not the point of this. The point is that scared money doesn't make money. If you're constantly thinking about trying to save as much money as possible, spend as little money as possible, and being scared that you're going to lose the money that you're saving, not only are you losing money to inflation every year anyways, so saving is stupid, but now every risk on opportunity that arrives to you in life, putting money into a business, putting money into a risk on investment, now becomes a decision of, I don't know what my future is going to look like. So your whole future is pivoting on this one decision. Whereas if you compartmentalize that into a completely different thing and you have your baseline to know, I'm going to tax myself this amount, invest it, have my projected amount that I want to be worth by the X amount of age. So if I screw everything up and end up working at McDonald's, I know I can still put into this process and get to at least a sustainable level. All of the stress goes out the window. Now you're not scared and you're thinking in clarity when other people are not. So we're not worried about getting rich when we're 65. We're worried about the mindset we're putting ourselves in to know that we'll be okay by the time we're 65. But now the goal is to see how fast you can actually pull it off. And so the reason that I was able to have clarity and be able to execute in times like this, which has basically put me to where I am right now, is because I had that fundamental understanding that I think is extremely important for everyone to understand. You can see this is where I was loading into all my positions, and from here we're up 7, 8x. You got to remember, at first I started with about $15,000. In that period of time when crypto sold off, I was basically investing a little over $250,000, which was a majority of what I actually had to my name. And some of the calls that we made went up 3, 5, 10x, and basically allowed me to amass a substantial size portfolio. And from really figuring out my trading and figuring out my business, I've been diversifying, rotating into stocks, rotating into crypto. And as weird as it sounds, my focus now is on becoming a billionaire at some point in my life. Now, I don't really care about the money. I think it's about who you become going for a next level goal like that, and the positive impact that I would be able to have as far as education on investing and the impact that I would be able to have in the world. I've basically taken a bunch of amazing minds around me, including my best friend Alec, who does all the videography that's brought us to 1 million subscribers on YouTube. He's editing this right now. Shout out to you. And countless other members on the team that I now consider family that I've been able to take along this journey and document on YouTube up to this point. So humbling to be able to have an impact on people's lives that are also learning and starting up this trading process and seeing these results. Most importantly, I feel like sharing this story is so important because everyone's going to have a different background, a different story, different goals, and different starting points. And realistically, we'll see if this is right over the next 10, 15 years. But if these models are correct into the future, Bitcoin should be worth well over $1 million in the next 10 to 15 years, in which case everybody has an insane opportunity. This isn't financial advice. This is purely the opportunity that I saw, that I continue to see. So I've built out a framework to navigate this simply and effectively, and that's what I want to continue to share with people on YouTube and on the private side of our team. What I want to say to you is this. I wanted to share this story, not to brag, but because everybody's going to have a slightly different story, different goals, different objectives, but don't let that glass ceiling box you into something. Set yourself up for an abundance mindset, and don't overestimate what you can do in 6 months and underestimate what you can do over 10 years. Everybody's on their own path at their own rate. There's people who are doing insanely better than what I'm doing, that are substantially younger than me. I'm nothing special. My only goal is to inspire and help as many people as I can with this. If you're still here and you sat through this entire story, I would recommend subscribing so you know when I put other videos out. Make sure you hit the like button if you like this and it helped you in any way. Let me know in the comments your goals and your thoughts. You can check out our team right here, more videos right here. But until next time, I will see you all in the next video.
मार्च 1936 जर्मन चांसलर एडोल्फ हिटलर ने फ्रांस के बॉर्डर के पास राइनलैंड रीजन में 20,000 से ज्यादा ट्रूप्स भेज दिए। ऐसा करना अपने आप में उस वक्त के प्रोमिनेंट इंटरनेशनल ट्रीटीज जैसे ट्रीटी ऑफ वर्सेल्स और लोकानो पैक्ट के खिलाफ था। वर्ल्ड वॉर 1 के बाद जर्मनी को उसकी मिलिट्री को एक्सपैंड करना और खास तौर पर उस मिलिट्री को राइनलैंड रीजन में भेजने से रोका गया था। लेकिन एक कैरिस्मेटिक लीडर ने जर्मनी को एक नया कॉन्फिडेंस दे दिया था। मेक जर्मनी ग्रेट अगेन के मंशा से देश को नई दिशा मिल रही थी और अब वो देश अपने आप को इन ट्रीटी से बड़ा समझने लगा था। 3 साल पहले ही जर्मनी ने लीग ऑफ नेशंस से विड्रॉ कर लिया था और तेजी से वो अपने मिलिट्री को रीबिल्ड कर रहा था। खतरा दुनिया को साफ दिख रहा था। दूसरे देशों की जिम्मेदारी थी कि वो एक रोग डिक्टेटर को यूरोप में अराजकता फैलाने से रोके। लेकिन उस वक्त के ग्रेट पावर्स फ्रांस और ब्रिटेन ने हिटलर के खिलाफ कोई भी एक्शन लेने से मना कर दिया। 1938 आता है।